Anybody who has uttered a sound on American radio, it's because of Louis Armstrong's innovations.
Take me back to the beginning. How did you get on board this project, and what was it about Louis Armstrong that really spoke to you and made you want to tell his story?
Well, in order to really understand the music, you've got to understand the man. When I started to do the research, I was completely blown away by who he was. And he reminded me of so many people I grew up with. And one of those people is Nas. He reminded me a lot of Nas. So I said, let's do this, like Popeye and Brutus. When I told him I was doing the film, he says to me, Wonderful World is my favorite song. I was like, really? I had no idea. I was like, well, I'm making a film about Armstrong. And he's like, really? I was like, yeah. I said, I gotta have your voice. There are letters and things blanks we need to fill in. I want you to do it. And he has such an iconic, recognizable voice that it just worked out. A lot of people don't know much about him or have a particular perception. When I was coming up, I was into Public Enemy and sort of Black consciousness and trying to find my identity, and his facial expressions and how he conducted himself. And based on what I'd heard, not from what I knew, but from what I heard, it was like, oh, this guy's a sellout, or well, I can't get with this. But when you do the research and you learn, you're like, this guy is the most woke, most conscious, smartest person you'll meet, most creative. I mean, I can't name anyone in the modern era who has as many talents as him. There's nobody.
That kind of leads me to where I was going, because you do like to play in the music space. And so here we are, 2022. Music is where it is. And I think there's a lot of opinions about musicality, people's talent levels. Where do you see it? How do you feel?
There's great music from all eras. But if you look, you flash to now, and there's a particular artist, I'm not going to name by name, but he's got to tell people all the time he's a genius. He's got to tell people he's rich. He's got to tell people he's smart. He's got to tell people he's woke. He's got to tell people what he thinks is best for Black people. Look at him and then take a step back and look at Armstrong. He didn't have to tell anybody he was a genius. He didn't have to tell anybody he was rich. He didn't have to tell anybody he was smart. He didn't have to tell anybody he was woke. He lived his life by doing and leading by example. And for me, he led with his creativity, and he led with his character. And, it's easy for me as the old man to say, oh, I don't know what these whippersnappers are doing. I'm not into it. But I'm not supposed to be into it at the same time. It's not really supposed to speak to me. But I feel like today's generation should recognize those who came before you and recognize the sacrifices that made it possible for you to do what you do. And that's where a guy like Nas understood that I didn't have to ask him twice. He said, of course, because he understands who Louis Armstrong is. And I think music is not as potent. It's one thing to be talented and naturally creative, but if you don't understand what came before you, you're going to think that you're original and that you're a genius, but it's all been done before you, homeboy. So, wake up.